What if the greatest empire of the sea vanished, not by war, but by silence, and the world forgot they ever existed? Tonight, you will hear the Phoenicians' story, sea kings erased by history itself. Imagine 1200 BCE along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, cities rising on rocky coasts, their harbors humming with long, slender ships. These are Phoenicia, but they never called themselves that. Their name came from Greek observers describing their purple dyes, the Purple People. They were master shipbuilders, traders, and navigators. Earth-based empires saw land as power. Phoenicians saw the sea as opportunity. At their height, they controlled commerce between Egypt, Anatolia, Iberia, and beyond. They founded Carthage in 814 BCE, becoming rivals to Rome in centuries to come. They spread their alphabet, 22 characters, into what became the basis of Greek, Latin, Hebrew letters. Their ships carried metals, cedar wood, glass, and purple dyes so rare it was worth more than gold. Sources like Herodotus and Assyrian records note their voyages. Clay tablets from Ugarit mention their merchants. Evidence is etched into archaeological remains, Tyrian kilns, coastal ports, amphora shards bearing the stamp of Phoenician hands. But despite their reach, rival powers feared them. Egypt tolerated them under tribute. Assyria tried to dominate them. Babylon sought to control their trade. And yet, behind the scenes, there were silent wars of suppression, trade sanctions, forced assimilation, rewriting of coastal chronicles. The question that haunts scholars is this: when their empire waned, why did so many records attempt to erase their name? In this chapter, we lay the foundation. In the next, we peer into the hidden techniques of erasure. When Assyria conquered Phoenician cities like Sidon and Tyre in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, they didn't just take tributes, they took control of histories. Royal inscriptions carved over older walls, genealogies edited, enemy names erased. The Assyrian king Esarhaddon claims in his annals he tore the city of Tyre to pieces and wrote over their proud names. These are not poetic metaphors. Archaeologists find reused inscribed stones, palimpsests of humbled legacies. Persia later absorbed Phoenician territories into its satrapy. In Xerxes' naval campaigns, 480 BCE against Greece, Phoenician mariners were conscripted into his fleet, but Persian records list them simply as coastal auxiliaries, erasing their identity. Over time, Greek historians favored Athenian or Spartan narratives, neglecting the contributions of sea traders who laid foundation for Hellenic commerce. Their ships, routes, and markets became footnotes in the stories of others. By the Roman era, Phoenician languages and city names were Latinized or suppressed. Roman historians sometimes name Tyre or Sidon, but rarely acknowledge their earlier grandeur. In Arabic medieval texts, coastal names survive, but stories of maritime dominance fade. This process of erasure, of editing out storylines, didn't require war. It required forgetting. And the question remains, what were they trying to hide? Even in erasure, fragments endured. The Carthaginian Empire, a Phoenician offshoot, carried on their seafaring legacy until its fall in 146 BCE. Roman writers, including Livy and Polybius, document Carthage's naval power, but seldom link back to Phoenician roots. Yet coinage, mooring structures, and shipwrecks off Sardinia and Sicily show unmistakable Phoenician design. These archaeological whispers prove the Sea Empire's technical brilliance. Inscriptions popped up in remote corners: Byblos, Lixus, Utica, bearing Phoenician script long after the language receded. A 2nd century BCE inscription in Malta, for example, mentions payments made to the sons of the sea. Inscriptions in Iberia record shipmasters of Tyre as civic officials. Inscriptions inside Egyptian ports mention Phoenician mariners who navigated Red Sea trade. They were small signposts refusing to die. Cultural echoes appear as well. The Carthaginian goddess Tenet, the cult of Baal, and religious motifs migrated into Punic, later into North African and Iberian temples. Even early Christian writers in North Africa refer to Phoenician ancestors in sermons. Music scholars trace rhythmic patterns of stringed instruments back to Levantine sea trading folk. Here, piece by piece, we see the scaffolding of memory rising again. Next, we will examine the last days of the Phoenician cities and how their final decline was recorded and buried. By the 4th century BCE, internal pressures, shifting trade routes, and foreign invasions began to strain the coastal powers. Alexander the Great's campaigns, 334 BCE, struck the Phoenician cities, claiming tribute and hostages. Tyre famously resisted for 7 months in 332 BCE. Its island fortress breached only after Alexander built a causeway. Yet, in his accounts, much of the maritime glory is glossed over in favor of tales of conquest. After Alexander, Hellenistic rulers absorbed Phoenician cities into kingdoms under the Ptolemies and Seleucids. The Phoenician elite gradually adopted Greek culture, language, and governance. Their original civic institutions faded. In 64 BCE, Roman General Pompey made the remaining coastal states into Roman provinces, dissolving independent maritime rule. What remained of Phoenician identity increasingly existed underground. Family traditions, local cults, merchant guilds speaking dialects in hushed tones. The final recorded flickers of direct Phoenician authority appear in the 3rd to 4th century CE in Carthage and coastal Lebanon under Roman rule. Local city councils still acknowledge old magistracies with Phoenician names. After the Vandal invasion, 5th century CE, and Byzantine reconquests, the region becomes Christianized and Latinized. Churches replaced temples, priesthoods replaced merchant guilds. Much of what was once public life went private, relegated to memory. In our next chapter, we'll piece together the modern rediscovery of Phoenician legacy and how the silence is now unraveling. The modern revival began in the 18th-19th centuries, when European explorers began excavating in Lebanon, Sicily, and Tunisia. In 1860, Ernest Renan excavated in Byblos and published Mission des Phénicies, making Phoenician architecture and inscriptions better known. Scholars like Jules Oppert and George Smith translated tablets, linking Phoenician trade networks to Assyria and Babylon. Suddenly, buried cities spoke again, but often in the languages of colonizers. In the 1920s and 1930s, French and Italian archaeologists uncovered Tyre's harbor installations and Sidon's necropolis. They found houses with Phoenician mosaics, harbors with mooring stones, and amphora dumps stretching into the sea. Radiocarbon dating confirms some port structures were used continuously for over 1,000 years, from Phoenician to Roman to Byzantine. And DNA sampling of coastal populations in Lebanon shows genetic continuity consistent with ancient Levantine lineages, fingerprints of people who never left. Today, new methods, satellite imaging, LiDAR, underwater drones are revealing submerged ruins, lost jetty stones, and underwater trade routes once thought impossible to map. Historians and local scholars are now reclaiming Phoenician heritage in Lebanon, Palestine, North Africa, and Cyprus, installing museums, restoring ruins, and reclaiming the narrative. The silence is cracking. The last chapter examines what it means for us now, living in the shadow of an empire intentionally erased.
The sea never forgets. Even today in coastal Lebanon, the smell of salt, the ruins of ancient quays, and the faint remains of amphorae remind us that Phoenicians once ruled these waters. Modern ports like Sidon, Tyre, and Beirut sit atop the ancient skeletons of their forebearers. Local traditions, maritime lore, names of bays, old ship launch ceremonies persist in villages whose families trace ancestry to those mariners. In North Africa, Tunisia's coastal ruins and Algerian harbors align with trade patterns once dominated by Phoenician ships. As we live in a globalized age, the story of the Phoenicians gains fresh meaning. Their bold trade networks, early alphabet, and maritime spirit laid the groundwork for modern commerce, communication, and culture. We are heirs in ways unspoken. When we sail trade routes, use alphabets derived from theirs, or tap into Mediterranean identity, we walk on paths they charted. Rediscovering them is reclaiming roots erased by empire and silence. Tonight, you stepped into their forgotten world, into harbors of stone and salt, into the silence that grew after their conquest, into the resilience of memory. The Phoenicians weren't just merchants or sailors, they were architects of connection, carriers of culture, and victims of erasure. Their legacy hides in whispers, but it will not vanish again. In History for Sleep, we will continue this voyage, deep diving next episode into Carthage's war with Rome, Phoenician diaspora in Iberia, and modern claims tracing bloodlines. Sleep with their story echoing in your mind. Until next time, rest well under seas of possibility and memory.